free service from the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis. This is a free service that connects community and stimulates conversations and shares ideas. And we began offering these programs at the start of pandemic, and we have now hosted over 160 of these free programs as a resource for the community. We've had registrations from all 50 states, and we have also get from this, registrations from 30 different countries. So we're so very excited to have this platform to be able to share not only the exciting and incredible research that's coming from Brown School faculty, but we also have so many of our community partners engaged and who have volunteered their time to participate in today's programming. Today's program is part of our observation of Black History Month, and the response has been overwhelming. Today's program had over 1,000 registrations, which makes it the most popular session that we have held so far, and just demonstrates what a tremendous interest there is, not only in celebrating Black History Month, but also in diving into some of these really interesting conversations. Now, for those of you joining us on the Zoom webinar, we can't see or hear you, but we want to hear from you. So we'll be monitoring your questions through the Q&A feature. And we want to welcome those who are joining us on the YouTube live stream or those who are watching the program later. Unfortunately, we're not able to accept questions through YouTube or from the future if you're watching it at another date. So with that little bit of housekeeping done, it is my great pleasure to turn the program over to our interim co-dean, Tanya Edmond. Tanya, would you like to share some opening thoughts with us?
Thank you so much, Gary. Welcome to Black History Month at the Brown School. We're so pleased that you've taken time from your day to join us for conversation and reflection. Black History Month is observed in different ways by different groups. At the Brown School, it is part of our mission to strive for a more equitable society. We think there's no better way to honor and celebrate African Americans and their history than to honestly assess where we are on the journey towards a society in which all people truly have equal opportunity. Our theme this year is Champions of Black Health and Well-Being. Against the backdrop of a pandemic that has hit Black and Brown communities disproportionately hard, we're paying tribute to trailblazers, leaders, and heroes in our community and nationally. And we're hosting a series of webinars to stimulate thought and conversation. As educators, and one extremely powerful tool at our disposal to stimulate thinking is to ask questions. Questions that are deceptively simple or questions that are provocative have a remarkable ability to engage our brains and lead us to deeper understanding, if we allow them to do so. Today's presentation asks just such a question. Our presenters are two of the assistant deans here at the Brown School. Cynthia Williams is our assistant dean for community partnerships. She's a Brown School alumna and a 40-year veteran of the Washington University staff. She helps provide leadership to the Brown School's efforts to nurture community collaborations, both that advance our academic mission and produce positive impact to the St. Louis community. Joel Stafford is our Assistant Dean for Field Education and a teaching professor at the school. Joel is director of our Racial Equity Fellowship Program. Her research agenda focuses on examining racial and ethnic health disparities among medically underserved communities, especially Black populations. Here to stimulate our thinking, please lean in as Joel and Cynthia consider the question, is professionalism a racist construct?
Thank you, Dean Edmond. Thank you, Gary. And to my co-facilitator, Jules Stafford, thank you for partnering with me and to getting into good trouble. So as we begin our presentation today, I am also very pleased to announce that Black History Month at the Brown School actually began on January the 19th and will conclude on March the 1st. So we are very excited for the commitment of the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis to advancing this important celebration. As we begin our conversation, we want to acknowledge You can transition, please, Jewel. We want to acknowledge that the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, is within the ancestral homelands of the Osage Nation, Missouri Illini Confederacy, and many other tribes that have resided, occupied, and called this region home. We honor them and pay respects to elders past and present. We also want to know their names. We acknowledge the 1,252 Black American men and women who since January 1st, 2015, unjustifiably died due to police brutality and anti-Black violence. We acknowledge the circle of mothers that resulted from these deaths, the purpose of which is to bring mothers who have lost children or family members due to senseless gun violence for the purpose of healing, empowerment, and fellowship towards a larger aim of community building. Also laying the groundwork for this, we want to acknowledge the emotions, next slide please, and the feelings that you, our audience, will be bringing to this conversation. Those emotions and feelings are very important, and we do want to acknowledge them, that some will be apprehensive and concerned. There are those that are curious, some are angry, fearful, are indifferent. They've already expressed their distress, hesitancy, and weariness. And I have to tell you, I was approached by a colleague at another institution who said to me that they were weary of hearing about the pandemic and almost as worried about the topic of racism. So I don't think that she's here this morning, but I do want to acknowledge that there are those who don't feel that the topic of professionalism is one that should be discussed. But we feel a little bit differently, and we're grateful for the open classroom. Proceeding to our next slide, we want to just give you a little bit of background. And what would Black History Month be without a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King? His quote is, "We are not makers of history. We are made by history." And we include this quote from Dr. King to make the point that human beings are shaped by the world around us. We are who we are because of the history we've lived in and shared. The truth is that Jewel and I love this United States, our home St. Louis, and the state of Missouri. However, the other truths are that Missouri is responsible for having penned some of the most racist and discriminatory practices and policies that have impacted our region and the nation. Those include education, housing, redlining, and the Dred Scott case. As a result, it is our personal commitment to explore all forms of oppressive constructs that impact all populations and pose a barrier to achieving professional and personal goals of anyone. We like to acknowledge the Council on Social Work Education, the National Association of Social Workers, and the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis for their commitment to eliminating racism and advancing equity locally, nationally, and globally. We'd also like to let you know that, yes, we are aware that our topic is professionalism. Is it a racist construct? We thought it was a simple question. We mean for it to be rhetorical. We are not trying to get individuals to buy into our perspective, but we are going to give our perspective today. And we just want to let you know that there was a possibility that if this were another month, say March 1st, that would be Disability Awareness Day. Professionalism, the topic might have been, is an ableist construct. Next, March is Women's History Month. We might have approached the same topic by professionalism. Is it a misogynistic or sexist construct? Next, we have June, which is Gay Pride Month. We might have approached it by saying, is it a heterosexist, homophobic construct? And last but not least, next slide, if it were November, we might have not put a question mark and just said professionalism, confronting anti-Indigenous and systemic racism. Next slide, please. But it is 2022, Black History Month, and we have objectives for this presentation. We would like to explore existing professionalism standards, not all because we don't have time, but a few, and their effect on those most impacted. We want to encourage thought partnership with our audience today about professionalism standards at your organization. And we'd also like to suggest your role in organizational change. So for your consideration, before we can go into the discussion, the presentation, we're asking you, where do you land? In order for you to get the most out of this presentation today, we want you to understand that there's two types of thinking. Binary thinking, when human beings oversimplify complex concepts, ideas, and problems and confine them into being one side or another. This type of thinking tends to put human beings at extremes because of the gray areas that are not considered. And we'll talk about that more. Also, spectrum thinking, when human beings consider multiple options, alternatives, and possibilities that sit in the gray areas between binary thinking. This type of thinking is most likely to consider effect and impact on the human experience. So we'd like to just warn you, if your propensity is to fall more into the binary thinking, this presentation will become prickly very quickly. But if you're more on the spectrum thinking, you might just walk away with a different perspective. Next slide.
And so this gives us a great opportunity. Thank you, Cynthia, for setting the stage. This gives us a great opportunity to transition into the pandemic and what it did to our professional standards. And I want to take us back to what feels like a land far, far away, which is 2018 or 2019, where we really thought about our professional standards through that binary lens. Either we were working from home or we were working in an office or we were working in a building. And what the pandemic did was give us a little bit of spectrum thinking, right? It allowed us to think through all of the different ways that we could still be able to work and perform our professional standards, all of the ways in which we could teach and be taught from home. We invited people into our homes in ways that we hadn't thought of before. And so all of that gives us an opportunity to be a little elastic around our professional standards. And so let's take a quick look into where we were and to where we are, right? So for those of us who worked in cubicles, for those of us who had 9-to-5 jobs, for those of us who had dress codes, you know, starting March 2019, March 2020, that shifted for us. And for the last 18 months, we've had to reconsider where we work and how we work, but our productivity hasn't necessarily changed, right? And so we take a look at some of the pictures that are on the other side of the screen where we see people working on their laptops in their bed or they're top and professional. And what that really allowed us to think about was the way that we shredded this idea of professionalism. We opened up what we could be, and some industries and employees had to readjust their standards to reflect what the needs were of the pandemic. And we started asking different questions. We started asking questions like, what do you need to be able to work at home? What do you need to be able to work from school? And it allowed us to tailor our approaches to the needs and the expectations of our employees. So let's move a little bit into a framework that we really have grappled with a lot here at not just the Brown School, but we've grappled since I think about 2014 in the region. And we really want to take a look at the framework and the pillars of white supremacy and think about how this constructed idea, this constructed culture of what is the norm and what is normally privileged can actually be the standard for a group, a town, a community, an institution. And this widespread ideology is baked into the beliefs and the values and the norms for many of the things that we do, especially in various industries. But what it also does, what white supremacy seeks to do, is disconnect and divide people from their authentic and genuine ways of being and knowing. And it creates an opportunity to other people who don't belong to the us, right? So it creates this division of us and them. And so the people who don't necessarily subscribe to the norm feel like they're looking from the outside. And this nation has been teaching us overtly and covertly that when we center whiteness, that has value. And when we don't, that there's something diminishing and devaluing about that. And so we want to walk into the next set of slides in the presentation to really pull in this notion that having uniqueness and having value and having all of these authentic ways of being is an opportunity to be inclusive. So we're going to call you a little bit into that conversation. We also want to establish that professionalism has sometimes been used as coded language to center white favoritism in the workplace. And we want to understand that the work that we've done as professionals in this space, both Cynthia and I, as social workers first, as Black women, is that we want to create an inclusive environment where people can be their authentic selves. And that includes our students, our colleagues, and of course, our community. So these are not all of the characteristics, but these are the top 5 that we've noticed seem to come up a lot, right? So which of these characteristics of white supremacy culture are present or that you've observed in your organization? So how many times have we seen this idea, or maybe not even seen, but felt this sort of implicit and subtle way that perfectionism is the key way to become successful? That if you are a mistake, that if you make a mistake, then you are a mistake. And what we want to share with you today is that there are antidotes to some of these. And for perfectionism specifically, is allowing people to understand that making a mistake is just a lesson. We all didn't wake up knowing exactly how to do our jobs. It's a learning process, it's a journey. And so how do we create, again, some elasticity around what we consider the learning curve? And so some of the other things that we see is the sense of urgency, our timelines and our deadlines, and not really being as inclusive with a democratic decision-making process. And so defensiveness also appears when there's fear that rises in us. My new co-dean and I talk a lot about the zero-sum paradigm, right? Defensiveness comes when you feel like you're losing something and there's a fear of losing either your privilege or you feel like you're losing something really, really of value. But what if we shifted that and thought that it was a gain, that we were gaining more knowledge and we were gaining more perspective, and that was adding to the tapestry of knowledge that we currently have? And then there's quantity over quality. We find this a lot in mixed methods research. There's a great deal to quantify what's going on. And lately, what we've recognized is the art of storytelling adds such meaning to what the data is really telling us. And so now we're starting to see storytelling and dissemination of qualitative works having more added value because it's actually giving us meaning to the data. And so that's super important for the work that we do, especially in the academy. And then number 5, the worship of the written word, right? If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. How can we find different ways to shift that paradigm as well? And how can we include the lived experiences of people who has a different lens in the way that they look at the world? And so when we shift these processes and we shift these practices and we shift some of these policies, what are the things you think we need to keep? And what are some of the things we need to change? And what has to continue to make sure that we shift towards transforming systems to center the underserved? So one of the things that tends to happen, and I'm going to do my best to share this video and hopefully it shows up, and please let me know if you can hear it. It's this idea of the narrative. So a lot of us have this idea that even though we're working really hard, that there's a narrative that we're not enough, that somehow who we are, what we do, it's just not enough. And it creates this idea of the imposter syndrome, right? Where you start to doubt yourself because even though you are trying to be the best that you possibly can be and meet certain standards, there's a narrative that it's just not enough. And so we're going to look at this really interesting take on how to dispute and how to refute the imposter syndrome narrative that sometimes happens in our head. So I do want to also provide a trigger warning. There's a tinge of profanity in one of the clips. So I will start.
Placed second, receiving a silver medal. Gotta hurt a little bit. Kind of faltered on that McTwist. How are you feeling about that?
I did everything as I expected to, and I came in second. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with twitter.com, but on the website right now, Black Twitter says, I killed that shit.
Obviously didn't land that last jump.
Oh, I didn't expect to land that jump. I was taking a chance. So it's crazy that I'm alive right now.
Obviously not expecting Germany to bring that level of competition to the game.
Oh, no, I fully expected Germany to do what they did. They do that kind of stuff for fun. I believe it's an ice sport country. You know, I'm from West Philadelphia. I learned at the YMCA how to do my thing. So it's amazing that I made it here in the first place. Shout out to my man who won from Germany. I see you. Yes!
Very optimistic. No regrets, apparently.
No. We got some champagne in the back, so I gotta go. But yeah, shout out to everybody. Shout out to my mom. Right, bye.
Well, there you have it. Quinta, silver medalist, gotta hurt, but she's tried her best out here, and
I sure did. Listen, I'm at the Olympics, and I got second place. What place did you get today? All right, buddy. Stay warm out here, all right? Hey! Oh, hey.
Back to you.
So that's just a brief example of what we should do when those voices come in and when those narratives. I'm going to move to our next slide. Okay, so thinking about Quinta, thinking about how she was really working to push past this narrative of not being enough, how are these traditional standards or how are some of these professional standards impacting the culture of your organization? Let's think about the administrators, the colleagues, the clients, the students, and our community members. Some of the top ways that we found that it shows up for some of our people of color are in our dress and our hairstyle, in some of our hiring and promotion metrics. So who was the last fired and who was the last hired? Who was the last promoted? And what was the process? And what were some of those metrics? Gatekeeping, who's opening the doors for some and who's closing the doors for others? I will tell you that our profession as social work, we're looking at this process intensely and acutely because we've recognized that sometimes, even though we are operating as case managers and as community leaders, that sometimes we may have sided more on the government or the side of leaders or the side of policies that may have had unanticipated outcomes. And we really want to provide a reckoning for that. And so how are we thinking about the ways in which we open doors and close doors? Communication, right? What are we thinking about our tone, our word choices, our jargon, our display of emotion? Who in your organization is allowed to display emotion and who gets judged by displaying emotion? And so thinking about how some of these things are operationalized at our workplace is a key way to thinking about how these standards impact our culture. How is cultural awareness threaded through our organization? So not just because it's a month, but how are we thinking about putting equity on the agenda of our meetings, right? Thinking about ways to really move through some of those things. So one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that there are racial gaps in the wealth area, that there is racial discrimination and there is racial prejudice at work. And so here's a survey that really asked US professionals who have encountered racial prejudice at work. And as you can see, people of color reported experiencing racism more than their white counterparts. Additionally, Black women are 80% more likely to change their natural hair to meet social norms and expectations, and that Black women reported being 1.5 times more likely to be sent home or experiencing some sort of hair discrimination. And so, you can read the rest of the stats, but really what we want to elevate here is the idea that bringing my full authentic self to work may sometimes close doors for me and may not necessarily give me the opportunities or provide me with the opportunities to do that. And so as we shift from the statistics to the next part of our conversation, we want to call you into this conversation. This is not an opportunity to call out any types of behavior. We really want to invite you into thinking through what your role is and give you an opportunity to think about how you can be an ally, right? How you can stand next to the people who are experiencing these, the discrimination and the prejudice, or sometimes the doors that are closing on their face. How can you be an advocate? How can you, help people who may not know all of the ways to navigate, whether it's healthcare, the criminal justice system, or even the educational systems? And finally, we call you in to be an accomplice. So how can you collaborate with us and work on the behalf of those who are most impacted by any phenomenon and help to create an environment where the outcomes are no longer predicted by race, by gender, or ability? So what's your role? As we talk through some of these frameworks and we talk through some of these, the stats, as you look at Cynthia and talking about her beautiful way of being an Olympian, what do you think your role is? Where do you think you fit in this paradigm? So we have a couple of ways that we want to invite you into this conversation. We want to invite you to recommit or commit to being an anti-racist. We got this from the University of Pittsburgh. It's on their website, and we also have a lot of resources to share with you. But we want to just acknowledge that there are zones in this work of becoming an anti-racist. And the first one is what we've already acknowledged, that there's some fear around it, right? Perfectionism is a real thing in our society. And sometimes we feel if we can't do something perfectly, that we're not even going to do it at all. And sometimes we deny that something exists because we really don't understand it. And so sometimes we avoid asking the hard questions. We choose comfort over challenging ourselves. And sometimes we become critical as opposed to becoming curious. And so we're going to invite you into the curiosity part and include you into the learning zone, where you recognize that it's an issue. You start thinking about how things are defined and how they're measured. You start thinking about how it's impacted people, and you're learning about the diverse history of people who are impacted by, again, white supremacy culture. And then we're going to shift you from the learning zone to the growth edge. And we want you to think about ways to shift from being just a learner of the things that have happened and the history. We want to move you from theory to practice. And I say that a lot in my job because I sit in field education, but we really want you to become great practitioners and great consumers of this work, because the more that we do this, we can do it well, we can get better, and we can transform and move throughout some of the cultural dynamics that have excluded others for a long time. We also want to invite you to be advocates around anti-racism. And so we're going to ask you to familiarize yourself with some of these coping strategies. We want you to think about the ways in which you can think about code switching, the ways that we think about shedding, the ways in which we think about covering, the ways in which we think about imposter syndrome, even John Henryism. We want you to think really hard around the ways that people are coping with some of this. And so shedding is a really important term that I think my immigrant brothers and sisters and even my family have shared with me about the ways that you try to shed some of your cultural values, the way you try to bless and release some of the things that were inherent to your culture so you can fit in, so you can assimilate, and so you can acculturate. And then you can feel like you are part of the American culture, right? For some of us, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but we're going to talk about covering, how you cover your hair, how you cover your natural curls, how you think about covering the things that may be inherent to you, like your henna tattoos, or maybe just your tribal tattoos or your tribal signs and signatures. So how are we doing that? And then there's this thing that I just finished talking to one of my colleagues about, and it's imposter syndrome. And it's this great article on Harvard Business Review. It's the most downloaded article that says, stop telling women they have imposter syndrome. And the truth of that is, yes, we have self-doubt. And yes, when we're doing something new, it feels uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that we're a fraud. It doesn't mean that we don't belong. It means that we need to have some grace for people who are still learning how to learn something new. And so imposter syndrome is what we feel when we're not looking at the systems of systemic racism or sexism or ableism, but we're blaming the individual for not just going along to get along. And when they don't feel like their voice is heard, sometimes we internalize what that feels like and it becomes imposter syndrome. John Henryism is a great active coping strategy for some of us that have been talked about, that has been taught the American folklore about John Henryism. And it's a great active strategy for being determined and committed, but sometimes being the fastest, the quickest, doing things twice as well, just so you can get through the door, also has some deleterious effects on our health. And so Sherman James is a researcher that talked about how John Henryism, our active coping mechanism to be better and to be the best, can also hit a tipping point, and then it creates health disparities. So we have higher stress levels, which then create hypertension and diabetes. And so I really invite you to look up the term John Henryism for that reason. Part 2 of this is to support the Crown Act. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to invite Cynthia to say anything in case I've missed anything.
No, absolutely not. You've missed nothing. So this is an opportunity, though, for those, if you go back to the slide 24 for me, just for a second. When you look at these coping strategies, we're saying to our audience, we understand that we are not defining them. But on slide 23, this is where you get the opportunity to go into the learning and then growth zones. So we don't expect that you would think we'd have time or the capability in 40 to 50 minutes to give all of the definitions. So we're hoping that you, slide 24, please, Jewel, will take the time. If you don't already understand or know what code switching is, shedding, covering, imposter syndrome, and John Henryism, we encourage you to jot these coping strategies down and do the work. Thank you, Jewel.
That's right. So that is part of our commitment to each other. If you haven't noticed, Cynthia is not just my mentor, she is my accomplice in this work. She works actively in spaces where I am not, to make sure that the agenda is, that it's being elevated, and I do the same for her. And so also just thinking about how we are modeling that today is just, it's key to the work that we do. So I want to call your attention a little bit to the Crown Act. This is legislation that is designed to end hair discrimination. And so CROWN stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World with No Racism. And when we're talking about those coping strategies, we have a really quick clip to show you around a journalist that is actually engaging and calling her coworker into some of that storytelling that we were speaking about, sharing her coping strategies, and inviting her coworker into her personal experience. And I think that's so important for the work that we're doing right now. So I'm gonna move on, and please let me know if you can't hear me. I can't see anyone, so just let me know by getting off the mic.
Creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. That's the meaning of a bill known as the Crown Act. It comes after decades of race-based hair discrimination that has resulted in denial of employment or educational opportunities for people of color. Deanne is here now to tell us about the impact the Crown Act could have in Florida in this week's For the Culture.
Hey, good morning. So in my hair right now, these are braids. It's one of the many natural protective styles black and brown men and women both wear. It's also a style some would say is unprofessional. The Crown Act is working to ensure hair can no longer be a measurement of professionalism.
Should I go in there with my natural hair with my sister locks, or should I, go back to the nice long pretty weave that, I threw on any other interview?
Wear her natural hair or put on a wig. That's the reality Shamika Howard faces before any job interview.
The idea for sister locks was because they were more professional to me, and I worried about what it would look like in the workplace, being in the field that I'm in. It's predominantly white, male-dominated field.
I'm hearing you talking, you're saying, I wanted it to look professional. What does that mean?
Well, to me, it's what society has thought and deemed as professional.
Afros, braids, locks, twists, and knots, all natural styles that some say are unprofessional or distracting.
I've had white bosses, mainly women, men don't really say anything, but they'll be like, oh, your hair is so pretty, like then they want to touch it or whatever the case may be. And then when I've worn my afro, it's been like, oh, well, that's different.
Kelly Richardson Lawson is the founder and CEO of the Joint Collective.
We were seeing in 2018 case after case after case of beautiful children being sent home from school because of their braids or their twists or their locks.
She's working with Dove and the Crown Coalition, who created the Crown Act. It's a law prohibiting race-based hair discrimination.
From a historical perspective, we know that our hair has been used as a weapon against us in so many years, all throughout time and throughout history. And so the Crown Act, it represents our ability to have freedom of expression with our hair in its beautiful natural state.
10 states and 22 municipalities have passed the Crown Act. It was considered in Florida this past legislative session, but did not pass. It will be reintroduced next year with this in mind.
And for little girls to be able to look in the mirror and say, I'm beautiful, the way my hair is, the way it comes out of my head.
And Howard wants the same thing for her daughter.
I want her to be able to, embrace that and be okay with saying, Mom, I want dreads like yours, or Mom, I just, I want to put my hair in Afro puffs.
Now, California was the first state to pass the Crown Act on July 3rd, 2020, and that day actually marks National Crown Day. And Avery, I do want to kind of share my story as well. So right here behind us, last Crown Day, I actually posted my journey because I experienced hair discrimination while working as a journalist. And so I wanted to highlight that, yes, my hair is beautiful. You can wear your natural hair as well. And I'm just so proud to finally work at a place that embraces it.
And we love you every way you are, Deanne. For someone who may be watching this right now and kind of going through the same thing, what advice do you have? How did you handle that when you went through it?
I mean, handling it was very hard to do, but honestly, kind of like the woman that I interviewed, I gotta have this job. So it's something that you have to wake up, you have to tell yourself it's only temporary. It's only temporary, and eventually someone will understand and know your worth.
I love it. Thanks, Deanne. Love your hair. Any way you wear it, my friend.
Thank
David.
you.
Powerful.
Pretty powerful, right? So sharing that story wasn't easy. And I'm sure as a journalist, you could even hear the emotion in her voice as she was talking about her coping mechanisms. But it's also inviting her coworker into that perspective. And so how now can people who now understand what that means, that it's part of our identity, but that it's always been used as a weapon, right? You heard that word too. And so we want to call you into just the conversation, just a little bit, to just breathe through that and understand that people do want to bring their full authentic selves to the job. It's where we spend most of our time, right? Many of us spend most of our days there away from our children, from our family. And so imagine being in a place for most of your day, for most of your life, and you can't share that. So we want to elevate that a little bit more. So how do we create a community of practice? So we talked a little bit about this idea of being an ally, being an advocate, being an accomplice. We want to create a community of practice. Everyone that you've seen with us today on this panel, we not only work together, but we practice together. We've had hard conversations in the last maybe 6 to 7 years. And what that has given us is a sense of trust and a sense of relationship. So when it's time for us to do the hard work, we trust each other to do it. I trust Gary, I trust Tanya, I trust Janet. They are my accomplices in this work. And we've been doing this at the Brown School for a very long time. And we consider ourselves a community of practitioners. And we also find ways to center that work when we are teaching, when we're doing research, when we are in our communities. It's hard, and we also have to learn to take the feedback, right? So we're not doing it perfectly, but we've learned to establish a community of practice where we can also take the feedback. And when my slip hangs, as they say in church, someone will let me know, and I trust that they are there to help me do better, not to make me feel like I am the mistake, as we were talking about previously. Cynthia, anything you want to add as we talk about community of practice?
I think that you make a great point, and our intention is to invite our audience to really consider the things that can be done in your organization. We are inviting you, before you take the seat of impossibility, take the seat of what's possible. We can do this together. The standards that we have highlighted, we have highlighted them to let you know that they hurt women, they hurt children, they also hurt men, not just in the Black community, but across many communities. So look at your industry. What difference can you make when you look at the standards of professionalism, how white supremacy shows up? What coping strategies are your colleagues having to employ just to make it through the day, just to stay employed? Thanks, Jewel.
So thank you, Cynthia. Some of the things that we have listed on the slide for you are just some really key ways that you can think about moving, again, from that learning zone to the growth zone. So how are we thinking about hiring experienced facilitators that will help us to identify and address our implicit biases, where inequity is showing up, and how white supremacy can be barriers? They can also help us to develop a common language, right? So many times we say words and we may mean very different things. And so what's the common language that we want for our organization that describes where we're going and how we're going to get there together? So we also want to think about developing metrics that measure the organizational culture, that measures the organizational practices, including cultural awareness. How aware are we of the various and the diverse cultures that exist in our organizations? And that's not just including what you can see. This is an opportunity to make the invisible visible, right? So what are some of those ability challenges? What are some of the ways in which I, in my own privilege, walk through and open doors and do not consider people who are impacted by my privilege? And then how can I elevate that privilege to open doors for others? How are we defining and measuring success by centering BIPOC experiences and perspectives? What are we doing to assess and evaluate workplace practices and culture through a racial equity lens? And that means, again, where outcomes are no longer measured by race, by gender, by ability, by orientation, by citizenship, by status, right? How are we assessing our practices and calling people into being more inclusive? Examining our hiring and promotion practices, both by process and outcomes. So when we see an outcome that's unanticipated, that we didn't expect, can we look at the process and find ways to improve them and figure out where those gaps were and who was missing? Who was missing at the table? Whose perspective were we missing? Whose advice did we not check with or check in with? And then how do we demonstrate those outcomes in performance and annual reviews? How are we centering this work in the work that we're doing, right? So how is it showing up in our agendas? Are the things that we say that we do and our vision and our mission and our values, are they showing up in every place and everything that we do? In our literature, in the way we speak, in the way that we communicate? And then how are we opportunities that decenter and challenge white supremacy culture? So let's think about how we can deconstruct white supremacy and center equity. Some of the best things that we've started thinking about is how are we including our donors, our board of trustees, our upper management, our philanthropic initiatives in centering equity? I happen to be on a call today where I was with one of our donors, and they were not only excited to do the work, they want to make sure that our students come along with them on the journey. And so how are we making sure that we're asking the hard questions? For us, it's not hard because we've been asking this question for some years now, but how are we challenging ourselves and thinking about how are our institutions through grants and policies and investments, how are they harming our communities? How are they benefiting our communities? And where are our communities on the boards? Where are they in our meetings? Where are they in our schools, in our teaching, in our research, in our practices? Are we seeking them out as collaborators and as partners? Or are we seeking them out because there's some expected end? And so these are some questions that we like to ask ourselves. The other one is, how can organizations center equity that affirm and uplift our communities? So it's really about this idea of who and what are we centering when we make any decision. It's okay to acknowledge what's happening, but when you acknowledge and you have awareness that the outcomes are going to be misaligned with what your intention is, then that's when you get to say, okay, let's think about this again and let's re-examine our process and let's reimagine what this could look like. Anything you'd like to add, Cynthia?
No, you're doing just great.
So finally, we want to create a really cool slide on the A, B, C, D, and E organizing for change. And so we talked about this idea of being an advocate. So advocate for change where you are. And you all have a sphere of influence. Wherever you are, you can influence change in that arena. And we believe that you can do hard things because you are where you are for a reason and you are there to reconcile those differences. So do it. And if you find that advocating for that change may be a little bit too heavy, well, build a community of practice. Wherever you are, find like-minded people, like-minded souls that want to participate in that change with you. Sometimes they may not necessarily be in your institution initially, but there's always opportunity for people who want to join in and participate. So look at the big picture, understand who has the power to make some of those decisions, and challenge them to be more inclusive. Thirdly, our C is thinking about ways in which you can participate in perpetuating the Crown Act. So if it's not passed in your state, can you be a part of the change that you want to see in the world and sign a petition to get the Crown Act enacted in your state? And then how are you going to work on decentering white supremacy culture? We have an entire article that talks about the 15 characteristics and the antidotes for that. So we encourage you to look through that. We also encourage you to look at the article, Stop Telling Women That They Have Imposter Syndrome. That's a really good one, and it's by Harvard, so we esteem it to be a really good article. And finally, evaluate your organizational practices. Really think about the outcomes that you're seeing and think about the processes by which they came about and how you can shape and influence the changes you want to see. And so finally, this comes from Forward Through Ferguson, and this is an opportunity for us to center just the work that they've done, not just with us as amazing thought partners and leaders in the region, but just for the work that they've done for elevating racial equity for us all. And one of the things that I love about this statement is it talks what change requires, that it's not just the thought and it's not just the reading list and it's not just the webinar, but it requires different choices, different decisions, different actions, a different effort, new relationships and new habits. And it really does require us letting go of the known and wading through this unfamiliar found in the dark of the unknown. And so again, we are calling you in to be thought partners with us in this journey. We think this is the beginning. We will have a lot more events throughout the month. We invite you to look through the rest of the webinars, but we also invite you to become our partners in many different ways. And so we have your information, and we hope that we can count on you to be our allies, our advocates, and our accomplices in the work in the future. And so these are some of the resources that we have for you. And here are some links that we also have for you to just look through, and some podcasts that we think would be really helpful for you in your journey, in our journey. And I'm going to stop sharing here and see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Jewel, as we get ready to transition to Gary. Thank you so much again for getting into good trouble with me. This has been an amazing adventure with you. We're also going to ask our audience to please consider sharing this video within your organization, because there just might be some pointers that could be of help. So thank you, everyone. Over to you, Gary.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jewel. Thank you, Cynthia, for an incredibly, well thought out presentation, and one that I want to share has been accepted by academic conferences, one of the leading conferences for the social work profession. So I'm so grateful and honored to be a part of a school that has such incredible women taking leadership on important issues, advancing racial equity. And I also want to thank you for concluding with that slide from Ford through Ferguson. I'm on the board of Ford, and I also know that the brand new co-chair of the board, Melanie Powell Robinson, is in the audience today, and her leadership has just been tremendous, and I'm very excited to continue that work. But I wanted to first read just a couple of comments, and I want to apologize to our viewers because we've received, first of all, I want to say so many incredible questions and so many thoughtful comments and so much love. I'm going to call it out. And we're so grateful for that, because as you know, there were some media outlets that portrayed this talk in a less than flattering light, and we were a little concerned about the type of reception we received today, and it has been just wonderful. So I want to thank all of you for showing such incredible support. So just a couple of comments. Here's one from Malik. I appreciate it when white people speak up about embracing and taking on that discomfort and pushing forward to be an advocate ally. Support shouldn't just take place in comfort. As a Black man, I don't get to avoid the hard conversations and comfortable situations. I appreciate my white colleagues when they actively engage and don't just put up a Black Lives Matter sign and give lip service. And so I want to thank you for that comment, Malik. And I also want to say, as a white ally, it is our responsibility to do the learning and to take ownership of that learning and not just completely depend on our colleagues of color to teach us. At the same time, I'm so grateful to Jewel and Cynthia, who are constantly lending me their ear when or pushing back when I need to be challenged. And I'm so grateful again to have you in my life. So here's another one from James. Wonderful, insightful presentation. Altruism, placing the needs of others before your own, is at the core of professionalism, particularly in the medical field. It would be nice to acknowledge the true positive significance of professionalism in medicine. Do you want to comment on that? Any thoughts?
Certainly. Cynthia, I can give you.
No, go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, totally. I think the do no harm and a lot of the efforts of cultural humility have come from the medical profession, and really trying to address the power imbalances that happen between doctors and patients. And I think that has gone an extremely long way. And I think COVID has really brought us a lot. The pandemic has really elevated that for our frontline workers who do that, tireless work day in and day out. And so, yeah, I think it is at the heart. And I do believe that medicine has come a very long way, especially in St. Louis, when we think about our history from, Homer G. Phillips to now. It has come a very long way, and it's transformed the way we think about working collaboratively with our communities.
I would also add that there is great concern, though. When I did a review of the literature, my heart was saddened at the gaps that remain for individuals, medical professionals who, like in all other industries, were experiencing discrimination and different standards for promotion or acknowledgement of their skills and abilities and contributions. It was heartbreaking, but we are committed to doing the work. So thank you for the question.
And taking that back to the social work profession, does NASW have a position on this, or what was the reception that you received at that social work conference? Are there a lot of discussions happening within the profession?
Absolutely. Not only are there discussions, NASW has a call to action to end racism. CSWE is planning on shifting their competencies to include more anti-racism and racial equity in the learning for all social workers. And there have been numerous conferences to really look back at history and understand our role as social workers in perpetuating some of these inequities that we see today.
And I'd like to add too, so has the National Association of Black Social Workers. Decades ago, this question still exists. This is not a new question. This is not new research. This is not a new conversation. Jewel and I are more than 20 years difference in age. And for us to still be centering on the same question that the NAVSW raised decades ago is really disheartening, except there is hope. because when the generations come together, which Jewel and I have, and others, we can address this topic without fear. I think we should be able to address the topic without fear of reprisal and harm.
Yeah.
So we've been getting a lot of, a lot of questions about what in-office culture is, but here's an interesting one from Atia that says, I also wonder about out-of-office practices, how colleagues and supervisors spend time together out of the office, and how it's categorized as part of professionalism or cronyism. It often excludes some and could impact their advancement. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, I happen to agree with that depending on who it is, who's meeting after work, it can be seen as good old, just after 5, having a good conversation and letting your hair down. When others of us get together, I've experienced in my career where my colleagues felt as though we were getting together to conspire against them. So it just depends on who it is still in 2022.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I want to just remind all of our viewers that this will be posted on the Brown School's YouTube page. Give us to the end of the day to get it done. Sometimes uploading a digital file does take some time. And I also would like to invite back our interim co-dean, Tanya Edmond, to share some of her thoughts. Welcome back, Tanya.
Thanks so much, Gary. And I just want to express from the depths of my heart how incredibly grateful I am to have both Cynthia and Jewel as colleagues, to have had the opportunity to work with each of you, to be engaged in this work towards equity within the Brown School, within the social work profession, within our community at large. And this was such an important conversation to bring out in such a public space, for us to be able to engage thoughtfully and challenge people to think deeply and differently about what professionalism is. I thought it was just an outstanding presentation, and grateful for your leadership in advancing these conversations and helping to expand, helping us celebrate our expansion of Black History Month. Thank you all very much for coming and being a part of this important event and sharing in this learning with us.
Thank you, Tanya. And I want to thank Julie Flory in Public Affairs, who's been incredibly supportive, and also the incredible Janet Gillow, our Director of Professional Development, who has done so much to advance Open Classroom and create this incredible platform. So please enjoy the rest of your day and come back and join us for some more Black History Month programming. We'd love to see you there. Thank you so much, everyone.